twice in history, at colonization and at independence. How did the government vest communal land into the president, yet as the chiefs and the traditional systems were there? Unfortunately, you can't see, but that's Domboshava. Can you see? There is no legal subdivision there, Mr. Dowie. People are just cutting land and allocating each other. Yes, Domboshava. That's Domboshava. I'm not even embarrassed to say some of my colleagues at UZ have bought land there. They are staying there. They commute every day from there. So that's Domboshava. Ward 4, Zimbiru, 60,000 people. That's one house there. You see, that one is owned by a person from the diaspora. So rural electrification has actually catalyzed the process, because why should I not be in Domboshava when the electricity is there? That's a baker's in truck delivering bread, because avachabikash mod. PPC, so the dynamics of communal land tenure. Communal peri-urban areas, they are experiencing pressure for land for housing for urbanites due to their proximity to large cities and fluid land allocation systems. Those who were moved away from here by Operation Mrambatrina, a significant number relocated to these communal peri-urban. So if government officials are here, when you conducted Operation Mrambatrina, you were not addressing a problem. It was just transferring those people to communal peri-urban areas. There has been development of a vernacular land sales market, Operation Garawajga, subdivide and sell, before central government and rural district councils repossess your land for urban development. In fact, I've categorized 2 factors leading to this phenomenon. Centrifugal factors, high population growth in Harare and Tungwiza, failure to secure affordable residential land in Harare and Tungwiza, high cost of living in Harare and Tungwiza, unemployment and underemployment in Harare and Tungwiza, increasing poverty levels in other rural areas in Zimbabwe. So these are pushing people away from Harare and Tungwiza and other rural areas. Then centripetal factors, the location of Seke and Domboshava within close proximity to Harare and Tungwiza, availability of reliable transport through and from Harare and Tungwiza, rural electrification, easy access to cheaper communal land, emerging economic opportunities in Domboshava arising from increased population in migration, and availability of natural resources which can easily be accessed. Those who have been in Seke, I don't know how to describe it, whether it's a gully or what, in Seke communal land. What I will just do is to get a proper picture using GIS so that people understand what I'm trying to say. I will include it when I circulate my presentation. It's sad. It's really sad. Environmental degradation at its peak. In fact, a manifestation of the tragedy of commons, because everyone now wants to exploit those areas freely without control. The key findings: rampant illegal subdivision and sale of communal land, codenamed Operation Garawajga. Operation Garawajga involving communal land holders. These people are resisting, saying, this is our ancestral land. It belongs to us. Generations of our ancestors have been using and tilling this land, and government now is saying, move away, and we only compensate you on your improvements. What about the land itself? It's our land. Owner gets selling price around $1,000, $2,000 per plot. These plots range in sizes, and it's said that in Domboshava there was a case where I said what has been sold because the land was less than 100 square meters. It was less than 100 square meters. Then the villagers, they get $100 to $150 for entry into the village register, and upon notification of the newcomer to the headman, Sadunu, to the Sadunu, or you pay $200. Then the tragedy of the commons, I've I'm talking about communal common areas, grazing land being targeted for sale, typically in Seke. Some of the grazing land, these are wetlands, but houses are being constructed on these wetlands. But we are saying these are precious natural resources which should be conserved. Environmental degradation arising from the extraction, should I say from free extraction of pit sand for sale into these communal urban areas, because there is a lot of hype of activity in terms of construction. There is not proper town planning and provision of basic services. I think let me just quickly go back. Can I be assisted? Where is he? Okay. Can you just move at the back? I'll show you the slide. Where I just want to read to you the medieval city. I want to take you to the medieval period. And in my thesis, I'm arguing that if we are not careful, our communal peri-urban areas are evolving back again into the medieval city. The unplanned medieval city, which did not have services. I'll just describe to you. And we are saying how many years? 2018 years after the, yes, back again. Back, sorry, come again. Come. If it's not there, perhaps I left it out. Come again. Yes. Come again. Down. No, I think I left it. I'll find some time to, I'll send it to you. But basically in that slide, I'm saying if we are not careful as Zimbabweans, our communal peri-urban areas are going to transform into the unplanned medieval city without any services. And it's a time bomb. We are talking about cholera in the urban areas and typhoid, but we should expect anything from these communal peri-urban areas because of the way they are evolving. There is no regulation. So no proper town planning and provision of basic services, rampant haphazard subdivision of land, no provision of basic services, people using deep and shallow wells. In cases where they are lucky, where NGOs have actually sunk bowls, they use those bowls. Then Blair toilets, high population in Blair toilets, small plot sizes, pollution of underground water sources. The next thing is typhoid and cholera. No graded roads, cut road, scotch cut roads, resulting in conflict with increasing vehicular traffic in those areas and a threat to human safety. Then deagrarianization, loss of agricultural land to non-agricultural uses, especially residential, the residential use, change of agricultural livelihoods, no cultivation of agricultural crops in the urbanized parts of Domboshava and Seke. And they've now found new ways of living, including vending in the CBD of Harare. Don't think that those vendors are only coming in Harare. They start in Domboshava. They wake up at around 1 a.m. to go to the markets in Domboshava. They fetch their vegetables and other ways. Then they go to sleep. At around 3 p.m., they then board combis because they know the municipal police in Harare are now knocking off. So that's when they start trading. And if you come into town, those who come into town at around 11, 12 midnight, they will be there searching for a living. Then ultimately there is increased vulnerability of certain households and their displacement. And the question is, now we no longer have more farms where these people can be sent to. So what happens to them? One planner in Manyame Road, District Council responsible for Seki communal lands, posed this question. What do we do with these people who want to continue with rural livelihoods? There is no more land to settle them for rural purposes. What do we do? They are now being forced to adapt to the urban livelihoods. Then quickly I said the recommendations. There is urgent need for the crafting of a national settlement policy, which I think will be incorporating land tenure. Then institutional capacity building for RDCs. One of the RDCs does not have a functional planning department. They only only have a planning technician. How does that person cope with a population now more than 100,000 in the district? Then undertaking of research on the continuity of communal land tenure, even in the rural areas, besides the communal peri-urban. Communal land tenure, is it still relevant? Or because of the changing circumstances, we need to review it as a country? I think the last research was undertaken by Professor Rukuni on land tenure issues, long back around 1982. Is that, or are those results still relevant? Or we need to undertake another exercise? In Namibia, they commenced rural land registration. And this has created employment for the built environment fraternity, from land surveyors, town planners, etc. But at least they are now trying to ultimately aim for a properly documented tenure system, including their communal land. Then reviewing of compensation procedures after excision of communal land into urban state land for urban development. It's a rhetoric question, but it's a question which is full of grief to say government and RDCs are stealing our land from us. So there is need for us for government and these communal people to have dialogue and engage, to find ways of properly ensuring that these people who have held this land are properly compensated, rather than just to take and compensate for improvements. Manyame Road District Council has made strives to say, okay, if we take your land, we'll give you perhaps 25%. But those who did not sell, they feel let out by the RDC, because they are saying those who sold and created more stands benefited more. If I'm just given 200 square meter stands, let's say 8 for my family, am I better off than the person who sold and harvested those 2,000 for stands, which they created out of their landhold? Then legal pluralism, synchronization of state administration mechanism with the traditional system to remove suspicion and conflict. If you talk to the Masabuku, vanenge vachitaura zvavanenge vachitaura vachitonge vari kureva makansela, when you talk to them vari kuitonge vari kureva Masabuku. So there is a lot of suspicion. How do we get these two systems synchronized so that we avoid the problems of legal pluralism? In summary, that's what I heard. But I've actually published an article in Zambezia, our UZ journal, on the dynamics in communal peri-urban areas in developing countries in overview, using Seke and Domboshava as my case studies. I've also done a book chapter, it's going to be released very soon. So when it becomes available, I will be availing material which I found out. I'm sorry I can't summarize everything in 15 minutes, otherwise, thank you.
I think just on this presentation only, this workshop was worth it to attend. Just to listen at least to this presentation. I think from just commenting on the provocations and the statements she was, every country in the world has once had a customary tenure system. So those who are, so it's important for people to say we have not invented anything. Those countries which no longer have customary lender tenure systems, if we were to say it bluntly, they are feudal and rudimentary. It is the lowest level in terms of, the development trajectory in terms of land management and land administration. And no matter how much we argue, markets are stubborn. No matter how much we want to preserve them, we must, I think, be forced, whether we like it or not, to also try to, to just evolve these systems with time. Just like anyone else in the world, If you see at the developed world and those world which are now mainly kind of having a freehold, they have at one time also having this kind of community and communal based, but they bulk to they can they can actually be subdued by pressure of economic and population increases, and they need to be modified. I was just quoting a few things from here which I want to kind of we have heard of Operation Garawajga, sell your land before they come. And these people is the state which people are trying to manage and to make sure that they are not disadvantaged. We have talked of unplanned medieval cities. You know, there are people who try to make some very logical academic argument about preserving a position and a system which we know cannot withstand the other economic pressure and the development stages we are. So as a country, like the president said, if we don't make the right decisions, the right decisions now, it's going to be more costly. Just hear the stories from Second Domboshawa. I am of late traveling a lot. If you are landing from either the Seke side or the Domboshawa, you know, before you go to Harare, you get into Harare, you see a sprawling urban-like area where you wonder to say, where is this place in Zimbabwe? You know it's not Harare, but somehow they are kind of heavily built areas. So I think this planning thing in the communal area, especially a dynamic land policy, which also may be required to have those per-urban areas to be afforded the freehold. I think someone from the land surveyors yesterday says there are also churches in the rural areas who are clamoring to have title deeds for their land. So this freehold is not only maybe a prerequisite for the commercial farming side of things, but also in some certain circumstances, even in the communal area. And we need that dynamism in terms of crafting a land policy. And no matter how much we try to preserve that as part of our norms, tradition, and values, but these economic pressures will be creating more problems for us, creating unplanned settlements, which in effect, one thing which the urban guys didn't mention is the concern of this unplanned settlement. If some of you have been into Addis Ababa in Ethiopia or in Nairobi, you would appreciate how bad and how sad. There is nothing as impossible and as difficult as to correct an unplanned settlement once it has been established. And no matter how much people want to romanticize this unplanned settlement and say they are fine, I think it's a time bomb for the country. Anyway, let me stop there and take this opportunity to call the next presenter. The next presenter is Mr. Devson Mugabe, and let me say a few things about him. Differentiate him from President Robert Mugabe. This one comes from Masvingo, just for on a light note. Then the next thing I would say is that he has been in farming the entire of his life. He has done nothing except farming, starting as a farm manager when he trained at Chibero College of Agriculture in the 1960s. And from there he went into managing commercial farms. So he started managing commercial farms. In fact, in the area that he first managed a white man's commercial farm, there was a big row, but there were always progressive and good white commercial farms even in the past. So this white commercial farmer said, this is the farm manager I have chosen. And all the neighbors were making all sorts of noises. So he started the farming in the commercial sector from the 1960s. Right up to now, he is still a farm. He has had a lot of experiences, including challenges to do with commercial farming. And Mr. Mugabe, it's my pleasure to call you to the podium to share your experiences.
a few corrections on that. Sorry, sound. I'll make a few corrections along the way. Yeah. When I was approached to say something on this meeting, I said to Dr. Do you think I can compress 46 years of experience into 15 minutes and make a meaningful presentation? And he said, well, you can do your best. But I just thought maybe I can just pick a few highlights of my experience. And along the way, we can see the development of agriculture, especially among blacks in this country. By the way, what he forgot to tell you is that I was once president of the Zimbabwe Commercial Farmers Union. Actually, I was the founder member. Now, we attended several meetings. You know, when you are president, you are called. So around the table, we would introduce ourselves, you know. He says, I'm Director, Minister of Agriculture, I am Chief Economist, and so forth. When it came to me, I would say, my name is Davison Mugabe, President of Zimbabwe. Commercial Farmers Union. It was a castle of Sony and it so far. Yes, definitely. I was trained at Chibero and completed in 1972. And from July 20, 1972, I've been on the farm that I currently own to this day. First as a manager, assistant manager, and then at the independence took it over. The reason why I think this should just be of interest is that when my boss came to pick me at Chibero at graduation, he brought a one-ton pickup truck to collect my luggage and you know, all the belongings. He was disappointed I had only a trunk. And they said, he could have brought a small vehicle to travel 100 kilometers to just pick a trunk. And they said, what is in the trunk? I said, books. There was nothing, just books and notes. But I said, there's also a diploma there in agriculture. And that is my capital. From there, I worked for 8 years for him. And when he decided to sell, I offered to lease the farm. Leased the farm for 3 years and purchased the farm in 83. I had nothing to my name except the books in the trunk. So my advice is, if we do this land tenure right, we can grow farmers, good farmers, successful farmers in this country like nobody else can do. There is potential and you can reach your height. So I Whatever I wanted to do, I was able to do because I had title deeds. So I won't even talk about title deeds and the beauty and everything. It is the only way. It is the only way. In '86, we, together with two of my white neighbors, we built a dam. 3.2 million cubic meters, or 800 million gallons if you are empirical, or the size that will supply Chipinge town. That's the dam I built with my colleagues. A few years after that, well, there were others who could not participate. They said it's too much, all sorts of excuses. A few years down the line, government pounced on us. They said, the water does not belong to you. The water belongs to government. The water belongs to the president. Anyone will approach Zinwa or the president through Zinwa and pay and access the water. My water, my investment, and I got it on debt. I borrowed. But I didn't see it coming. I thought, well, it's one of those things. This was long before the land reform. We were already affected by this kind of policy. And I didn't see it coming. And we were borrowing against the title deeds, we were borrowing against the developments, we were borrowing against the improvements, the dams and all that. Then ESAP came. ESAP was Economic Structural Adjustment Program, or dog-eat-dog policy in finance. And we were told that from now onwards, only the super efficient will survive. And I can tell you that is what happened to me. The agri-bank, which is government, says, but now you owe money and your debt is too much. We have to close you down. But in 2000, that is. I said, but you can't close me down when people are getting land for free. How can they buy my land when you are offering land for free? But maybe they were settling scores and they went and sold my farm. They cleaned me out, including veranda balls. Vehicles, tractors, anything that I had over the years accumulated was sold. They attempted to sell my farm, the farm itself, and they didn't find takers because land was freely available elsewhere. So I remained on the farm. I was walking barefooted, on foot, going to bus stops if I wanted to come to Harare. And people said, are you still alive? You haven't committed suicide. You know. I said, as long as I have water and that land, I am a barefooted millionaire. So, to pay off the debt, I slaughtered one of my cattle. That was the hyperinflation. During the hyperinflation, you know about that. I slaughtered one of the Mombes, sold the hind legs and the offals, and paid the 3.2 million debt. And then I I got a white guy who had lost land, and I divided my farm, and currently he's leasing. The part of my farm I'm farming on one side, he's leasing. You cannot go wrong with title deeds, I'm telling you. He's leasing. I've given him all the time he requires. He's built his house, he's built his barns, he does his own thing, and I'm happy, as long as the money comes in. And I calculated that during the period of the lease, he will not only pay for it's the water that attracted him, by the way. It's the water in that dam that attracted him. So I calculated that what he's going to pay me will pay for not only my contribution in the dam, but he will pay for the entire dam. $500,000 he's going to pay. So this is, to me, is a reasonable return after what I went through, which people thought I would commit suicide. My submission, or my view on the fear that if we introduce title deeds, the land is going to revert to the previous white farmers is misplaced. It's not those guys whom we should be worried about. It's the vultures among us who want to grab whatever somebody has put his life on and developed, and it looks now attractive, and they just want to take. That is what we should be careful about. And for that, I say, the title must be protected. There are measures which government and everybody must put in place to protect the title. Title, yes, but the title is got to be protected. You can't just let banks or anyone just walk onto your farm and say, get off the farm, you know. So we must put, if we don't do that, we offer title, they will go. But if we do title, but have programs to protect the title deeds, then we'll have a very, very wonderful and successful agriculture in this country. And by the way, this protection has always been there. And my colleagues in the white community know that. They know what I know and what you don't know. They were protected. If it is threatened by anything, come drought, then there's a program to make sure that the threat is removed. That's why we had drought relief. That's why we had diversification programs at UDI. That's why you had programs that compensate. You know, in 72 we had drought when I first started, and a severe drought. At the end of it, we got a check. We submitted our invoices to the government, and we got a check for all the expenses we incurred, labor, ZESA, everything. We were repaid to allow us to continue farming. These are the measures that I'm talking about. Sorry? Yes. And not only that, you know, he gave me, I'm saying we because my boss was white. But my father also, because he owned a small-scale commercial, he bought an ox called the Drought because he got a check for that. All farmers got payment. You have to submit your expenses. And the government made good. the water, I mean the programs, I can't list all of them. But just even the water. There was Farm Irrigation Fund, administered the Minister of Agriculture, to help people develop water and dams and all that. Well subsidized. And incidentally, that's the fund I used to build the dam. 2% interest, 20 years to pay. So, we also looked at settlements, because this is what we have gone through. Land reform is actually a resettlement program. There were resettlement programs before, many of them, 1923, 1971, they were all resettlement programs by previous governments. And a unique one for me, which I can just pick out, is the Middle Sabi resettlement program. The land was cleared, irrigation put in place, a crop grown for the new farmer. All he did was to walk and get the keys for a pickup and harvest the wheat, and that wheat was his capital to start farming. There were elaborate programs to make sure that farmers start on a good footing. When we do the land, I hear a lot of outcry about the land audit. To me, that's a waste of resources and time. What are you auditing? That has got 2 farms and that has got 5 farms. That has got 1. That has got 50 hectares. That has 100 hectares. That's not productive. We must use, if we get auditors and experts, we must audit the new farmers who are producing, who are productive, and quantify how many have we got. Is it 50? Is it 100? Is it 200? We must do that and create a database and know that we must grow these farmers. If we've got 500, we must make sure that we grow we train and grow and support so that we get to 2,000, to 4,000, and there are 18,000, I hear the figure. So we must try to get as much as possible through programs that I have just mentioned, and there are many that we can put in place. You can't just say, he has failed. What have you put? What is your input? We gave him command fertilizer. At what time of the year? Right now, people are receiving command fertilizer. Compound D. You see? But we must have programs that are meant to have people successful. My colleague yesterday said, it must be people friendly, not profit focused. And that's what we must do. People focused, people success. That's what we must aim to do with the audit. And the worst thing that we have done, she has got a name for it. He said the law of the commons. The tragedy of the commons. Yes. We have converted prime land into communal. All what you see in the A1 is nothing but the extension of communal farming system. That's what it is. How could we have that luxury The land was already marked for us. This is suitable for commercial. This is suitable for residential. Leave it like that. Let's have commercial land reserved for commercial. And slowly bring in communal. There are some communal which have got the potential. Slowly bring them in. And they will have title deeds like anybody else. And they love it. So this we must just try to work around it and correct it. If we don't, we are going for a shock of our life. In fact, the president the other day said Zimbabwe is trying to catch up. We are 25 years behind. In farming, we are 50 years behind. Because now we have reintroduced animal-drawn equipment into commercial. We are now in 1930 or 1930 or 1932. That's where we are. And that's where we must build from. Honestly, that's where we must build from. How do they do it from 1932? Because that's where we are. So, in conclusion, I enjoy this gathering. The other day, I've got a son. I've got 4 sons, and 2 of them are into agriculture somehow. The one is farming with me. He said, Dad, I don't want to do tobacco at all. I want to do maize and vegetables, food. I don't want tobacco. I said, but this is a tobacco area. You can't get away from it. He said, no, I don't. So he went on for 2 seasons. He tried. I realized they were going for a disaster, so I approached his wife. And I said, look, you see, I'm 70 years now. And you are not making use of the knowledge that I have while I am around. I believe when you pass 60 years, you no longer is useful to your family, only you become a natural resource. And I said, look, in a few years, I will go down and become a natural resource. And you are not picking all this expertise, knowledge, and experience that I have. And you wait maybe for my grandchildren, maybe they'll dig up, and maybe I'll turn into a diamond. You never know. But if you are unlucky, I'll be a coal. I'll just turn into coal. And what can you do with 5 kgs of coal? Make use of what I already have. And certainly, when I came here, when I was on my way, he said, look, I've done 1 hectare now. I want to do 5 next year. That is the thing. We must pass on. We must make use of the expertise that is available in the country, in this country. I tell you, if we had this forum before we embarked on land reform and sound out all these ideas that we are, and we are given a platform, just the experts here, and then I can tell you most of them are not here. But if we all just brought into a room, given some sweets and we could have produced a settlement that is cost effective, does not get us into a country that nobody wants to see, and maybe twice or 3 times productive. the tragedy of Zimbabwe is we invest in people who we don't make use of at the end. That is our tragedy. Thank you for bringing us together. I hope this is not the last. Maybe when you produce the deliberations, at some time we'll come and refine some of the areas that we think are not well, and continuous. You know, the Japanese, they've got that name. What do they call it? Kaizen. Continuous improvement. Continuous improvement. That is what we must do. I thank you.
I don't know what it sounded so emotional to me, but I thought he shared a lot of life and really life experience which he should benefit. I think our efforts to try to come up with a report that we think is going to inform the government and help them in the crafting of a land policy that can get the country to the Zimbabwe we all want and that we all dream of. He had said, a number of things. I don't want to add or subtract anything, but to say, Mr. Mugabe, I think you will be continuing to count on your wisdom as we craft this document, and I think for sure we will need your input into the final document. And if there are people who strongly feel that they do have some experience or some input that will be valuable, please feel free to write, to document on any topic that you think you would add. What we will do is, although we are going to have a synthesized report, we are also going to have an addendum of, or to put an appendix of all the ideas so that we don't distort some of the the good thoughts that are coming out of you and that you have. Thank you very much. The next speaker on the program is Mr. Dengu ready? Okay, so the next speaker is Mr. Dengu, a seasoned investment analyst and expert. Mr. Dengu has worked for a number of financial institutions, including PT Bank, which is now called the Trade and Development Bank. He is also in charge of, or he is the one who is the president or the chairman of what is called the Zimbabwe Business Forum. Mr. Dengu, say welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to be as elaborate and as experienced as my friend Mr. Mugabe, who has looked at us, who has managed our agricultural portfolio for a long time. However, I'm trying to bring in a different perspective. We want to see how we can probably get into smart farming, given the situation. The presentation is basically based on how best we can go around some of the challenges which we actually have, because the challenges are there. You don't know when they are going to come in, but some of them we just have to see how best we can move. So when I say smart farming, is we have there are now agricultural blockchains now which have been developed to actually put together all the stakeholders in the farming sector, because it is not land alone, it is not finance alone, it is not, you actually need to integrate everything in order to come up with something more coherent. Let's see, how does this move? Yeah. Okay, we said I'm the managing partner of CDF Trust. What we're saying, we need a paradigm we need a new paradigm to power agricultural production in Africa. Just for starters, sub-Saharan Africa imports $50 billion worth of food, mostly made up of rice, wheat for bread, chicken and beef from Argentina, Brazil, then cooking oil, for soybeans and the like. So when we're talking about the market, we should look at it. This is sub-Saharan Africa. These are official UNCTAD figures. $50 billion is what we simply need to replace by making our farms productive. I will also say Netherlands, which is the size of Hwange Game Reserve, if for those who know Hwange Game Reserve in terms of size, exports, it produces more eggs than the rest of Africa put together. It produces more milk than the rest of Africa put together. It produces more chickens than the rest of Africa put together. Not to say even flowers, because flowers we might, even seed for vegetables and the like, they've found niches where they've got capacity. Potatoes, just the Dutch potato, they produce more than the Africa put together, all sub-Saharan Africa put together. So they are in 11 agricultural commodities where they beat the whole of Africa put together, including South Africa and Egypt and Nigeria. So sometimes when we talk about land sizes and the like, some of the things we want to put it into perspective, it is not that but it is about management, it is about skills, it is how you organize yourself. So we really say technology makes it possible, but we now need to do what we're calling next generation farmers. Makes it happen. People make things happen, not the technologies. Right. What does an investor want, who wants to put into agriculture? Let's put it into perspective. When we say an investor, we mean Mr. Mugabe is investing in his farm. We are not talking of somebody coming from China or from Brazil. We are talking of the real Zimbabweans who are there, who are on the farms. An investor wants security of his investment. Security of investment, you will need security of tenure. That once his tobacco is looking good, somebody does not come up with an offer letter saying this is mine. He needs access to finance. He needs access to technologies, whether the kind of tractor or whatever, all the technology, irrigation and everything which are efficient. More important, access to markets. Access to inputs. You could have the markets and inputs, then fertilizer, like you're saying, fertilizer is being delivered now. It also doesn't help you when you don't have inputs. Then, of course, basic infrastructure. Sometimes you don't have a bridge, you don't have a road to get even to your farm or anything. So government also has a whole business of doing something very, very important on that area. So we are saying, what are the solutions? Well, we are saying people make it happen, but here what we are saying, we need to change. How do we go into demand-driven agriculture, demand-driven production? Why is it important? It is important because it allows you to plan. I will use Netherlands as an example because I've lived there for 20 years, so I know that sector fairly well. Milk processors will say we need, say, 10 million liters, say a month, or we'll call it a month. Then they work out to say, how many cows do you want? If you say an average cow does 25 liters or 30 liters, whatever average you, then you now work backwards because they know how much is required. Equally, here we know Zimbabwe consumes 350 350,000 tons of wheat for our bread. Why can't we now say for the 350,000 tons, if we are producing 5 tons per hectare or 6 tons per hectare, how many hectares do we want to put under wheat? So it allows you to plan how much seed you require, how much land you require, how much water you require, how much electricity you require. Everything you can work out, all your inputs, including labor, right? How many combine harvesters you want, how many tractors you want, because you are starting from a forward contract. Then you contract the farmers. They are not just producing there. So that paradigm is what we need to change, because I've seen in a lot of all developed markets, they don't produce until the order comes from the processor. I want this type of sugar beans. I want this type of this. Then they produce. So the orders are given now for the next season. So the other way we can also go is provision of services by third parties, especially when we are looking at the commercial production. It doesn't pay for a farmer to go and buy a combine harvester for 150,000 when he only uses it for 7 or 10 days in a year. People buy tractors just to show off when people come over the weekend. I've got this big tractor, this big tractor. But how many hours? You are still paying for the full value, interest and the like, yet you probably need your planter just for 7 days in a year. You need your boom sprayer. So what we might need to go around that, we might need equipment supply companies which will come and do the plowing for you, which can come and do the planting for you, which can come and do the harvesting for you, so that you just pay for only those hours instead of investing in capital equipment which you don't use, which you only use for 10% of the time or whatever period, because your depreciation and amortization costs are throughout the year, yet you only need them for. So this is one area which we need when we say smart farming. Then farm and farmer registration. We need a database of our farmers. Who is this, the farmer himself? This is Mr. Mugabe. He's got 4 children, 4 sons. And how many, including he has got an eye like this or whatever, identity, everything. You need your biometrics for the farmer. Then you need for the farm itself, which are the coordinates? Is it suitable? How much is irrigatable land? How much is distance from the nearest road, nearest rail, depending where you want? So that registration is important. Of course, the other solution next is, of course, advocating for land title deeds. Let's not fool ourselves. I've never gone anywhere in the world where you get rich people who don't have title deeds. It's a poor man's game. We just being told that usach kekeke uneta manyuka. Let's be very clear. Everywhere in the world, even the Chinese are moving in that direction. So title deeds they are just a must. Because there's this fantasy which we have, I don't know where we get it, that government is more trustworthy than its citizens. I will better look after my own land than government looks. Why should we, when we have land here, let's give it, people can better custodians of the land than government. Government can keep land reserved for public purposes, to build a school, to build some public services. But otherwise, private land, why should we put it under the custody of government? Because government, do you know, people perceive something owned by government, a government vehicle is no owner, it's abused and the like. If you see a government vehicle which was bought 3 years ago, and my car which was born 10 years ago, you would think mine is a new car. These are the reality of things, because nobody looks after it. So we need to trust ourselves. We better look after it. Again, land should come back to the market. Otherwise, it's dead capital. At the moment we don't have title deeds, it means we can't use that capital for something. I'll tell you, I know it's controversial, some people don't like me to use it, but our communal lands, nobody wants to live in there or to invest there because there's no title. And there's been negative selection. If you're building a hybrid, you take the best out of that and the best out of that, and you meet, then you build a hybrid. In our communal lands, we've been saying, she has 3 children, he has 3 children, the best go to town, the best go to town. Those who fail remain. Those who fail remain. By proximity, they marry each other. And the next door is reiterated. Then out of those, the best go to town, the best go to town. By proximity, they marry each other. So the intellectual capacity of our rural areas has gone down because no one is investing and no one wants to be there because you can't put your money where you don't have title. This is simple, straightforward. Because it is reality which we cannot, it's difficult to tell, but if you go in any one communal area, attending a funeral, you find the guys who are digging the grave, they will come and measure the coffin 20 times. Somebody comes with a string, somebody comes with this, because they did not do geometry, they were the failures. Anyway, okay. So anyway, what we're saying is, I will quickly in 2 minutes because we have no time. These things we can now do it. The challenge is first, like we've already said, financial services and the like. We can now communicate with our farmer if he's on the platform by mobile telephones now. This is now information. That's why we're saying smart farming. You can get access financial services. The mobile wallets which are there, which we have tested, which are already on the market, they've got a budget capacity where if I give you a loan of 1,000 to do 1 hectare, if $100 is for seed, you can only use it to buy seed because the biller codes of it will be for merchants who sell seed. If I say 400 is for fertilizer, you can only use it to buy fertilizer, even if I transfer it into a wallet. So there are now methods of communicating with the farmer, providing finance without actually going there. Then you can also send your information. This is how you plant. This is the problem and the like, because you can communicate with the farmer via text in a cheaper way. Access to markets and the like. The market player can also put what he wants to actually say. Sorry, I've run too fast. Okay. It has disappeared. But how do I move it on? Next. Yeah, oh no, you have gone too fast. Where? What we're simply saying, the system is, we want to collect the identification of the farmer as much as the parameters. This platform now exists. It's not we're not talking of something to be created or something, which can capture the identification of the farmer, whether you can also search whether you want a male or female. If he belongs to an association and the like, you can put it on. The value chains, experience of that farmer, whether he has got tree crops and the like, because even including financing, we've been talking, I think this morning, that when you are doing things like tree crops, you go for 4 years without any income. So the kind of financing you require if you are doing coffee, if you are doing oranges, you require appropriate finance, because when you plant it, you go on for 4 years putting in income. Usually it is beyond the capacity of an individual family. That's why corporate farming, we have to actually put it, especially for tree crops. It will be important to do that. So this, you can play around with whatever parameters this system allows you to do a lot. Then find the overall, when you see on a scoreboard, it puts the banks, the government, the inputs, the fertilizer suppliers, all on a blockchain. Blockchain merely means everyone has access. If you sign to produce, say I'm going to supply national foods, with it means they can see, the bank which is financing can see everyone around what is happening. So it avoids the kind of side marketing. Our farmers, unfortunately, have not been trustworthy to most of them because they've not been farmers. We want to try and convert landowners into farmers if we're going to actually make it. So otherwise, I will end here. A lot of things we can always discuss, but I'm saying let's find a different way of operating. If we change to demand-driven production, it will be a lot more efficient. We will allocate our resources in a lot better position. Allocation of resources is important in any economy. Thank you.
I'm sure we are getting the message. The next speaker, sorry for changing a bit on the timetable in terms of the arrangement, but the next speaker we are now calling upon is Mr. Busiso Moyo. We are very grateful to Mr. Moyo because he has traveled all the way from Bulawayo again to come and be with us this morning. Mr. Moyo is a past president of CZI. He is currently the chairman of the Oil Expressors Association of Zimbabwe. He is the managing director of not Unilever, but what is it? Oh, United Refineries in Bulawayo. So he is the MD of United Refineries. Mr. Moyo, we want to thank you, and please come to the podium to make your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Director of Ceremonies. Allow me to recognize the President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Vamakaya. And I would like to also recognize the Vice President of the Real Estate Institute, Mr. Millins. Thank you very much for inviting me, and good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me also to recognize fellow presenters. I think Mr. Denga is, we're preaching from the same hymn book, as it were. I think I don't have anything that's materially different among accountants, so they understand materiality. So I won't have anything materially different, but I will share a few things, a few thoughts, and then I will speak specifically about the soybean value chain, of which the oil expressors is a part of. So I start off with the next one. Do I have control? The content of my presentation is, I'm going to start off with an anecdote or a word of wisdom, and then I will give you a pictorial of Nicaragua, which also went through some of the issues that we are talking about concerning land and land title and the like. It's a good case study to work with. It's a live case, it's not yet complete, but Nicaragua is still going through the process of rectifying, but they've gone a little bit further than we have, so it's always good to look that way or in that direction. I will merely highlight it. I will also give you a little bit of a balance sheet. I collected some stats, not as complete as I would like, but I will share with you some stats, statistics in terms of land and so on in Zimbabwe. Then I will talk about the soybean value chain, which is where I sit. So I start off with this anecdote, which is from Proverbs 13, verse 22. It says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. If you break that down, you will see that there are 3 generations inside that anecdote or proverb, right? I broke down that verse. They don't do this in church, but I thought I would break it down mathematically so that we get an understanding that if you are leaving an inheritance for your children's children, it's 3 generations. A generation is 40 years. If I take 3 40s multiplied by, if I multiply 3 40s, I get 120. The problem with our 99-year lease story is that it prevents people from being biblical or fulfilling a biblical heritage. So this is fundamental. It becomes even more fundamental because I cannot do this. And this is just looking at me. If I look at my children, they definitely won't be able to do this if I'm the holder of a 99-year lease. We need to really get away. And I know from government, I trust their colleagues from government, one of the things I like about this new dispensation is we feel a little bit emboldened to say the things that we've always wanted to say, but couldn't say them. And we need to call a spade, and where we have differences, it's okay. It doesn't mean I must keep quiet about what I believe. It is my right as a Zimbabwean to air my views about how I see things and how things should be. It's not a battle of characters or individuals. It's a battle of ideas. Ideas and options and opportunities. So I look at this and I think we need to move away from the 99-year leases and free people. I like what the previous presenter said, that we should own our own land. We should have that right. I should have the right to leave a legacy for my children's 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 children. And I can only do that through freehold title. And we need to move away the conversation from 99-year leases and start talking, in my humble view, about freehold title. This is the pictorial I promised you. It's Nicaragua. And it shows a period before Nicaragua started dealing with the issue of land title and what happened to gross domestic product. I've got another chart. Unfortunately, I couldn't locate it. Another chart that goes beyond, because they did further work in 2002. So this is a trajectory. And Nicaragua, like Zimbabwe, is an agrarian economy. And so it becomes even more essential. The issue of title is not such a big deal if you're a desert, because there's not much you can do with it. But when you're an agrarian or an agro-based economy, and you would know that the correlation between our GDP and rainfall patterns in Zimbabwe is very high, which means we are still largely agrarian, in spite of all the mining and all those things. Mining is a very elite sport for very few people. Agriculture, on the other hand, is a far-reaching, broad-based, and this is important for us as business people, because when we have broad-based economic development, there is more spend power. More consumers have capacity to spend. And so it's very important. So I thought I would share this with you. And the source is the World Bank, so credible source. But it's very much worthwhile to take a look at and for further study and as we benchmark. I am aware that you spent the whole day yesterday speaking on some of these issues, so I won't belabor the point. I'll simply point them out. We then take an inventory of our land. The source here is the Ministry of Lands itself. They gave me these figures, and these are updated, as fresh as yesterday, so very up to date. And this is the structure of land as things stand at the moment. Communal land is 53%, and when they say communal land, if you know the land acts that have been coming since the British South Africa Company and so on, and the Land Act and what happened with the land and the things that went wrong or didn't go so well in that phase. So a lot of that communal land is untitled. This is the point I want to make. That 16.4 million is untitled, or according to the Land Act, that land belongs to the chief. I know where my father come from. I was feeling nostalgic, so I decided to go way back into Bulilima district, somewhere in the south of Zimbabwe on the border with Botswana, and I wanted to go where my father's homestead was and to find out what happened to his land. And I found out that the chief had moved some people onto that piece of land, onto his field, onto where the homestead was. My father cannot fulfill a biblical heritage to leave an inheritance for his children's children because the land belongs to the chief. So that communal land is dead capital as far as we are concerned. There's studies being done here, and I could talk about those, that the day that title is given, within 90 days, even the poorest of the poor will put up a stone wall around land for which they have title. So this is the importance of land. So that communal land, 53% is dead capital. The 41%, the Ministry of Land says, is leasehold, but we know that these leases are not yet live. They are not yet bankable. I don't know whether there's somebody from Bankers Association here, but I asked the president of Bankers Association in a public meeting, so I can quote her. She said, when I asked, are the 99-year leases that we have now, are they bankable? And she said, well, we are willing to consider them as part of the security that we assess when giving loans. Okay, that's a long, and usually when you get, the Bible says where there is a multitude of words, sin is not absent. So if the longer the answer, the more likely that there is something not quite exact. So I figure that the truth is they are not bankable, or there's still work to be done, I'm not sure. But right now you cannot go. So if I add 53 plus 41, I still get 94%. So 94% of the land in this country, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, is dead capital. That's a huge balance sheet. I'm among colleagues. Statement of financial position. To be correct, Mr. President, if we were to look at the statement of financial position of the country, 96% of it, 94% of it is dead. Only 6% has what I call constructive title. Constructive in terms of productivity. It allows a person to raise finance. It allows a person to have the perception of ownership, that he has a sense that I can leave this for my children's children. That's the trigger. It's a scripture, it's a verse, it's a proverb, but there's something more fundamental in economics, that when a person sees that title, their economic attitude towards that asset changes. And so this is the problem, or this is our challenge, as we say in Zimbabwe. We don't have problems, we only have challenges. So this is our challenge. There's concessions there. I've added it there. I've got a couple of friends in the tourism industry that own these concessions, 25-year concessions for those of you that are in tourism, and others. Slightly problematic, but a bit better. And I've seen people leveraging off those. The 1.2 million hectares is the old farmland, or the commercial farmland that was productive, and so on and so on. And if you go back, you will see that when people went to war and so on, they said that, you know, a huge chunk of the land was in the hands of the white minority, and so on and so on. So predominantly that chunk is still as it was. We have not really addressed the people, the masses, the kuteuka kweropa kuondo, all those things have not been addressed. And so this is a big outstanding item. And already we're parceling out land, we're coming up with new structures, but we've got an issue here. So I thought I would point out these very hard-hitting aspects to our discussion, so that they can inform the outcomes of this two-day symposium. I then proceed to a more pointed discussion of the situation is in the soya bean value chain, which is an easier subject. The soya bean value chain is a big value chain, undervalued, unattended, but very important. Around the world, soya bean is still now forms a big source of protein for both animal feed and human consumption. So it's a very important value chain. I would argue probably second after maize and so on. The sugar guys always have a go at me after this, but sugar, you all know the health issues with sugar. So I go for protein. And in the soybean value chain, you have soybean farmers. I just have this pictorial here to show you how many people or how many things are involved in this value chain. You've got seed manufacturers, you've got farmers themselves, you've got people that produce the seed, you've got the guys that make the irrigation equipment, the dam builders. They are all in there because soya is a high water, the requirement for water is very high. So with soya, we have to change the model a little bit. Your rain-fed soyas don't give you as good a yield as you would with an irrigated crop because it is hydrophilic and requires a lot of water. You then have from your soya beans, you can go to soya milk, and there's people that are doing this on a small scale. We sit over here as the oil expressors. We take the soya beans and we crush them into cooking oil, and we also produce soya meal, which goes to your stock feed manufacturers. Those stock feed manufacturers take that and they feed it to chickens, layers who produce eggs. The pig farmers also take it to produce pork, and so on and so on. And you can see the value chain there, how it sort of unfolds. There's also a byproduct of soap stock. At our factory in Bulawayo, we also take some of that soap stock to make soap. So the soap industry is part of that value chain. There's margarine, mayonnaise, a lot of condiments also that come from this value chain. So it's a fairly big value chain. I illustrate this so that we understand when we are talking, because sometimes when we talk like this as oil expressors, people think, oh no, these business people want to make more money. Of course we do, but it's good to make money while others are benefiting as well. And in this value chain, if we get it right, if we all play our part in this value chain, there's a lot of value, a lot of employment that we believe can be created. But it goes back to the subject that we were talking about, the land title. Will I buy irrigation equipment if I don't have clear title? It's a big question. I go into some statistics for you here. This is our soya bean demand annually. These are annual figures. And so we are still importing. This figure has changed slightly, the first line. But you can see, locally we only produce 30,000. We are importing the rest, 120,000. But in this last year, I can tell you that figure was much lower because of the forex situation. Soya meal crushing, those are the stats. Again, going into stock feeds manufacturing and so on and so on. The crude oil requirements, I mean, cooking oil is one of those very emotive commodities. We like the attention, but sometimes it's a little bit too much, but it is very sensitive. And so if you've read in the press, you will have heard we require about 10,000 tons of crude oil per month. And that's the situation at the moment. The production, you can see 2001, 180,000. So the peak, I think the most we've ever done, if we go back, I think, can't remember, late 90s the year, but we did manage to get a 220 somewhere. So that's our highest ever. But for the most part, you can see we've been on a downward there from 2001. 2016, we hit rock bottom at 30,000. I'm told that the estimates for this year is even lower than that, 25,000. So it makes sobering reading, but it also points to an opportunity that exists, depending on how you look at it. There's a whole value chain that is dependent on these production figures, which we can correct, and if we do correct, there are benefits to be made. To give you an idea, Malawi last year produced 120,000 tons. Okay, so takukundwa ne Malawi. No offense, but it's just something to provoke us. You know, Zambia, I think the figures, I see colleagues from the Farmers Union, they would know, but I think it was north of 300,000. 300,000 tons of soya. That's Zambia. But we know that a lot of the guys, I've got one farmer who used to call me from Kwekwe when I joined United Refineries. I was still part of TA then. He used to call me from Kwekwe and offer me soybeans every year. He called me last year, but from a Zambian number. And I had to get an import permit for his beans and so on and so on. So that's the story. But there's an opportunity there. Localization, I won't go too much into this, but I want to highlight one figure here, that for this country to be self-sufficient in its cooking oil requirements, we require 670,000 tons of soybean. I just want to highlight that for colleagues so that we are very clear. That's how big the order book is. It's a real order book because we import that much oil year in, year out. Whether there's forex shortages, whether we shut down the local refineries, we were still going to import that much to be self-sufficient on oil. Allow me to put a bit of pace here. Then I then just go into, this was an internal meeting, so this is an extract from a meeting that we had late last year about what is our vision, because as private sector also sometimes we spend a lot of time complaining, but we need to start articulating these ideas for colleagues and for other private sector players so that people can rally, entrepreneurs can put on their entrepreneurial capacity, and we begin to change our situation. So currently the installed capacity in the country, this is what I started with there, just showing you the tonnage production. That was last year. Command Agriculture came in, but because of the political transition, 2017, 2018, not sure, 25,000 most likely is where it's going to come out at. So we are putting our bets now, roll forward, 2018, 2019 season. Working together with government, and as oil expressors, we are looking or working on joint ventures with financial institutions. We don't have the balance sheets to be able to finance a whole crop. Colleagues from government will say, well, you guys in private sector need to fund farmers. Well, you know, we don't have the balance sheet to put away money for 6 months and wait for harvest. We don't have that balance sheet. So we need structures. And we believe that that is the role of financial institutions, to fund. We need to be part of it. We need to offer offtake agreements, guarantees. That's fine, and we are quite willing to do that. And we've had a couple of these farmers, commercial farmers, black and white, coming with offtake agreements, they're called. And we sign on, and they can then get financing from the bank. So that's where we are pinning our success. There's also a bit of joint venture farming. There's also some groups in the oil expressors who have capacity to farm and are looking for land that they can actually put into a joint venture and then actually produce. Not ideal. If you're a manufacturing guy, I focus on machines. I know about Beulah, I know about Krupp, I know about Dismet. That's my life. I don't know very much about yields and farming and rust. There's something called rust, not to do with machines, but to do with soya. You know, so this is not, what I'm trying to say is that this is not our competence, and sometimes it's taken for granted. You know, I'm a manufacturer, I can go and get land and farm and have a yield of 3. No, it doesn't work like that. So we think that there's opportunities for joint ventures with farmers, with banks, with oil expressors to start to address and move away from that. This is our journey away from the 30 to the 670,000 that I talked about. A critical rung is this one, because at the moment in your country, colleagues, the installed capacity of soybean crushing is 240,000 tons. This is not investment that we're going to have to invite Dangote for. It's here in the country today. In other words, if this country produced up to 240,000 tons of soybeans, it will have a market, because we have 20,000 tons of crushing capacity every month. discussions around prices. I see farming colleagues here. Yes, discussions around pricing and so on and so on. Import parity, protecting the farmer, encouraging the farmer. The cooking oil expressor being competitive on the shelves and so on and so on. We need to start having those conversations as private sector so that we don't invite intervention. And this has been the challenge of private sector, is that we attract interventions by getting to gridlocks very quickly that then invite government to come, and then we are all unhappy at the end of the day. But I thought I would share that with colleagues so that we see where we are and where we would like to go. But a key thing is that if the land issue, the land title issue is not addressed, this is going to be just a dream and very difficult along the way for people. I have investors who want to put money in this, but I always get the pushback that we cannot put money in this because the land title is not clear, it's unsafe and so on. So there's a perception and we have work to do. I end with these two questions. Will companies invest in infrastructure, dams, irrigation, equipment if title is 99-year leases which are not bankable? It's a big question. It's a big question we need to ask ourselves honestly and look ourselves in the mirror. Secondly, will Zimbabwe stick to its non-GMO policy on soya bean? Because this is a big issue. So we can, I don't want to say cheat, but we can get to the 670 faster from yield, just managing our yields. But a key to yield is our GMO policy, especially on soya, where the scientific evidence that soya bean meal, soya bean oil affects human health and so on, the impact, the scientific research is at best weak. But will we stick to that? It's a question we need to answer, and perhaps ICAZ, CZI, Real Estate Institute of Zimbabwe, we can start drumming up our voices, because if we're going to be self-sufficient, if we're going to create jobs locally, we may need to abandon some of these straight-jacketed policies that have been shackling us for a long time, because our colleagues are moving on and employing new technologies and research around this area and changing their own lives. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Moyo. I think we can draw ourselves the conclusions from what he was saying, but the issue of title is coming up very strongly again, and the opportunities in the oil soya value chain, if we can make use, if we can have a right policy, a right land and tenure policy, probably this is one area which could benefit from such a land policy. Thank you so much again, Mr. Moyo, and he has come all the way from Bulawayo. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a very quick and short tea break. I think let's literally grab our cups of tea and come back. We still have two presenters before we do the groups. But let's make off the tea to get our groups sorted. We'll start with them in their order: Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, Group 4, Group 5, Group 6. And when the groups present, please just mainly concentrate on what you think are the recommendations and the suggestions that will feed into a land policy. I know you had written some detailed notes. We are going to request those detailed notes to be submitted as well on the flip charts. And in some 2 or 3 groups, we already have volunteers to elaborate to almost write a paper based on the notes. So we check with the other groups, but for the presentation, it will be almost like 5 minutes to just highlight the recommendations and the suggestions that we need to put into the final document. So we have 2 more presenters after tea. We have Mr. Gwaradzimba, who is a chartered accountant and has also his own personal experience with land, which he wants to share and which we think will be useful in feeding into the final recommendation. considerations. We also have someone, Mr. Collett. He is from the wildlife side of things, and he will be sharing with us land policy from the perspective of the wildlife sector. So let's grab our cups of tea and come back so that the next presenter, Mr. Gwara Zimba, can just start presenting. Thank you.